Good morning, everybody. This is Pete Dahlgren, and I'm building Harrison Models F86. Now, what I'm doing here is doing all the final body work on the elevators before I start actually doing the glassing process. And there are a few little things that I wanted to show you guys about this because this area is kind of tricky to build, and it can be a deal, and you don't want to do an awful lot of overfilling in here because you're going to be wanting to keep the weight down. Now, the airplane is starting to get fat. And what I mean by that, I mean, now that we're getting the wings done and things are starting to go, I got one sitting here so I can show you a little bit more about what's going on. Now I clamped this one up here. I'm putting the leading edges. Now, those of you that are building this airplane notice that these fronts interlock on the ailerons, and this one's roughly cut, and the reason for it is because you've got to sheet the nose on that to get all that in there, and they do underlock, but you got to make sure you're building this straight. And it's I lost the footage when I did this one because I was in a hurry because we are moving, of all things. And the reason being for it is that we just decided we needed some more dedicated areas for different things, and yeah, life happens. But anyway, I want to go over this because this part of this airplane is a tricky thing to get to look right because it doesn't it's again, this is about building experience in what you're actually doing. Now I left this open so I can run some wire through here for the beacon that goes right there, and I've got to drill it and do this, but this will get glassed later, and you got to be very careful with this area. I actually broke this out, and fixing it is not an easy thing to do once you've done that. But getting this area in here and all this sanded out and filled, I left this wild so that I can come back and block this in. Now I got a little bit of a gap in here, and it's not a big deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to true this up. And it's really kind of a tricky thing to do, and it's not that I just kind of slopped it in there. I didn't. But this area that's in here on the real airplane is not flat as a lot of guys do. It actually does concave. Now I use a Bondo to get this, but if you look in here, I actually put a sliver of strap in here, and I will use my finger and actually run this through in here and make that fillet in there. Now this is going in an FJ2 configuration, and the reason I'm doing the FJ2 is because there's no landing gear for this airplane that rotates. And so it's very easy to add a few things that I'm going to be doing, like the arresting hook that goes in here. And there's also another skid plate that goes right in here, which I will make out of tubes and actually make it work. And that means I'm going to have a fiberglass panel that's going to come in here and is actually going to screw in and set in there just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and glass this and make that decision, the final decision on that. And I may just go in and cut out a deal because it's just like with the speed brakes and all that. I'm adding a lot of things to this airplane that it doesn't come with. You know, the speed brake was something that was kind of an afterthought to me that I did. This is not by anybody's advice or anything. It's just a neat looking. To me, I just thought they look cool, and F86s, they got to have that. It's kind of one of the signature thing about this airplane. Now, a lot of guys ask me about my gear door or my servo doors, and this is what they look like raw. It's 64 aircraft plywood, and then I actually sheet these, and I sheet them with balsa, and then I blend them into the thing. This is a preliminary hole. It could be wind up being a little bit bigger, but it is and you're going to notice that it's a very long linkage. It goes right there. And I'm going to be using HKS 737 servos in here because they're fast. They're a little pricey, but they're a very good servo. And you got to remember, you're dealing with a very large airplane here. So you can go with a lot of the different servos that are out there. Everybody's got their preference. Everybody I know that's using HKS loves them, and they are basically they're insane on their power. They're like got 300 ounce, which is really good for a big airplane. Now I use the same servos in the Spitfire when I built it, and they required a minimum of 100 ounce. But this is one of the reasons why I'm talking about the bigger, because these flaps on this airplane are monsters. They are absolutely, as you can see, they're huge. They are huge. They're 4 inches wide, and they're damn near, I think they're 19 inches long. And then I want to show you this here too, because you're going to have to build some ribs in here. Now, a lot of you guys have asked me about this back gluing method that I use, and this is what it should look like. Now, this is the top, and you got to make sure that you're facing these correctly. You want to make sure you're looking at this before you sheet one side and not the other, because what goes in there after I get done making a mess, these are going to go out, and they're going to require a bit of cutting. And these are the hinges that I'm going to be using, and they do actually sit in like this. So we got a lot of building yet to do. So once these go in and you've got them set in place, I am actually going to cut slots so these can actually sit in and be epoxied in. They got plenty of gluing space in there. And some of these might be a little bit different if you get here. I don't want to think shit they got, because this is okay. All right. You're going to get glue through there. They're not going to let go, but you are going to have to cut a couple of them down. But this is all the finalization of what's going on with all these parts. Everything's built on this airplane right now and getting ready for electrical. And the wing will get glass very last. But I'm going to start this so I can start the detailing process on that. And I am ordering the cockpit kit for this through iFly at Tilly's, which will be the exact same. It'll be the same size one that you would put in the Air World. But I want to show you guys on this what I'm actually doing, because all this is basically just a face, which I will put a couple of tests in here because there is an ABS cover that goes on that. And this just is something that it can glue down into. And the rest of this is going to be trimmed in and done. And then I'll be putting in the window defroggers and all that stuff like that. And this is one of the things where this is going to be really cool, because this is going to get primered right away. This will get fiberglassed, and then we'll go ahead and finish it up. And then these areas here are going to wind up being really cool. Once this is all done, we can adjust everything. We can get the pilot in it and everything else and start making this look like something. Now, I am going to be putting close to 30,000 rivets on this airplane. And the reason for it is I love the detail process. But the fiberglassing needs to be done. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, when you're doing your final body work, don't concentrate on getting this airplane perfectly straight. You don't want it. You want her a little bit wavy. Okay, any airplane, this is the main thing about doing body work on these things. You're not trying to get it completely straight. You want it rounded, but this airplane is not round. But what you want to do is fill up all the obvious things and sand to them and get it round, but don't over sand. It's one of the biggest things. I sand my wing skins on the floor with a block before I even install them, because Then I know my sanding is going to be a little bit 100. I might have a couple little spots to fill, but no big deal. And I like to fill first. And the reason I do it first is because I don't want to sand my fiberglass. I just want to block it. I'm going to put 3 coats of resin on this airplane. A lot of guys use 2. Now, I do it different than anybody else in there because I found a method that works well, that makes everything conform perfectly. And just so a lot of people understand, I am not new to composites. And so there is a formula for mixing the resin. And you're going to use denatured alcohol. And a lot of guys will frown on this. But I'm telling you right now, I've never had a failure with it. In doing it with the denatured alcohol, that balsa sucks it up so good. I mean, almost all the way through it. Let's talk about this resin just a little bit here, okay? Because this is something that everybody needs to know. Now, these hinges are for the ailerons and other things, but this is the best stuff you can get your hands on, and it's not expensive, and it's available. I got this through Zeroli with 1 ounce cloth, and the reason I did it was because we're not building the fiberglass on here for strength. And I know I've said this a million times, but I need you guys to understand we are going to strengthen this wood a bit, but what we're doing is we're keeping these fibers blowing up and splitting. You're gonna notice that when you get these things sheeted, that these parts become extremely rigid. If you build it right and you've done everything I've showed you that I've done so far, this airplane is built like a baseball bat. Okay, it is a very extremely strong airframe. Another thing too, guys, I'm not putting any keeper screws in to hold these in, because if you do them and you fit them right with the tubes, they're such a tight fit, they don't come out. They're not going to. And if you really want to do it, I will put a piece of tape in here, a piece of clear tape right in there just to make sure. And it's just regular clear vinyl tape. And that's how I'm going to hold these on. However, the vertical fin does have 1 bolt, and it needs it. Now, this thing is just so flimsy. This thing here, by the way, mirrors, if you're seeing this part here really needs to be made out of aircraft ply. The light ply is fine, but the durability factor on this airplane, this part really does need to be made out of aircraft grade plywood. And the reason being for it is because it's so flimsy. When I picked the airplane up, it started getting a little weight, and it got this. Now, glassing this will probably help the issue, but this is just a future thing that I would think about, guys, because this is where you're going to grab it. And I broke mine. I put it back together, but I'm going to have to come back with some epoxy and fill it and come back and do some hand sanding and filing. It's not a big problem, but it's not going to ever compromise anything on this airframe. So, but if you guys are inventive and you want a durable ass airplane, go down and get you some aircraft plywood and remake this part. I wish I had done that, but I didn't. And this is the only part that did flaw. The wood quality from Nurse is outstanding, and the workmanship is absolutely incredible. But don't let that fool you. It's just something that I'm bringing it out. Now, the one thing that I will show you guys, I use Bondo spot putty to come up and get these areas. Another thing I will do before I glass this is the day it is, I will dust it off really well. And then I will spray this whole thing down with Windex or any kind of glass cleaner that's got ammonia in it. Now, that is going to do one thing. It's going to raise, it's called casing, okay? And those of you guys that have ever built anything, fine furniture and all this stuff, you know what I'm talking about. You can do it with water, but another thing that this is going to do, and I mean soak the piss out of it, guys. I mean, get it wet. Another thing that it's going to do is it's going to relax everything that's got any stress on it. And then when you do your final sanding on it, you're going to find out it's another thing that will happen. And this is something on a Mustang that I really had a hell of a time repairing. By spraying the whole airframe down with Windex, that wood's going to move. If it's glued, it will stay right where it is and it will relax. And this is an embarrassing thing that happens if you go and you do your glassing the way I do, by mixing it equal parts of your resin. You're going to take 1 part, which if you use, you do 1 ounce, you're doing 2 ounces of resin, which is a lot. So you're not going to need that much. It goes a long ways. Now, you take 1 part. So if you use a 1/2 ounce of resin and a 1/2 ounce of hardener, always, always, always favor the resin. It won't, putting too much hardener in that stuff, guys, it'll take twice as long to dry and cure. And that's not what you want. You want this to go in its non-derogous atmosphere, which means it doesn't need any oxygen to cure. It's going to want to flash. But by mixing it down to a water consistency, 1/2 ounce of resin, 1/2 ounce of hardener, and 1 ounce of denatured alcohol, it turns it into the consistency of water. And what that does is it's going to, when you do your wet out on this, you're going to notice that it will damn near draw it all the way through that balsa, and that cloth will damn near disappear. You won't even see it. And then you can go through and do the same thing by putting 2 more coats. The second one fills that weave real nice. There's no pinholes this way, guys, at all, period. Now, I might catch a little help from Bob Moore about this, because everybody knows the guy and everybody knows how good he really actually is. But I'm going against the grain because as a composites guy and a former laminator for Bayliner and Meridian yachts, we used to use this on plywood parts. And we found out it does actually make that stuff turn into a freaking rock. And you won't believe it. On boats, it's the same thing. So the one thing is, you can do it that way, or you can do it with a credit card and you can squeegee it on there and let it soak into the wood in this. But with the denatured alcohol, you're absolutely 100% guaranteed that it is going to penetrate every little thing, and all these details you took all this time to sand in and all these little things you did are going to go, which is why I fill this first. Bondo is designed to absorb primers and other top coats. Okay, it has to be. It is the perfect filler for balsa. For the fact is, it is so porous that when I go and I put the epoxy on there, it'll go all the way through this and still go into the wood. And that's when you're going to start seeing your popping and your pinholes and all this other crap that happens. But here's another beautiful part about this. Anything that you missed, you're guaranteed that these are going to get filled. Now, Bondo, if you get it wet, it takes a long time for it to get rid of that water. The alcohol pulls the water out, and it also pulls the water out of the wood and it dries it out. Okay. Now, if you go to talk to any boatwright or any shipwright, they're going to tell you that when they go in and they get a waterlogged boat and they go in there to fix it, to recoat it with fiberglass, they use exactly the same method, me included. Found this out years ago by working on ships, especially old wooden oak boats. We had to find a way to get rid of the water. Denatured alcohol did the trick. So, any of this, if there's any, and if you live like we do, which is on the water, nothing ever dries out. So, we have to go to extreme measures to make sure that what we're building is actually going to be completely sound. Getting that water out is pretty important. But replacing all of this hard balsa and getting into these grains, these will draw in so much material you won't give it. And that's why we use that 1 ounce cloth, because if you don't use it, this will start breaking apart because it will naturally dry out. And with that being said, I mean, all these little parts and pieces, it's going to take a lot to get this in glass and get it in primer and this and that. Now, my third coat is going to get guide coated with, when I get ready to do this, I will sand this down with 220 and knock it down. And then I will use a 2K primer, high build 2K primer on this. It's an epoxy. And that will tell the tale. I'm going to show you how I am actually going to go and guide coat this, because there's no other way to do this. If you've done any body work on cars and all that, if you don't guide coat it, it looks great until you paint it and it's wavy as hell. What I'm going to do is fill all these little flat spots that are in there completely with a primer. And with 3 coats on there, I've got one that I can actually go through and actually work it. So once we get it primered and all this, you're going to see this, that the first coat of primer you put, it will almost completely disappear except for all your low spots. And that's where you're going to get a second coat of primer on there. That one usually does the trick and starts going, and then we'll go with panel lines. You know, again, I'm not trying to get this completely straight. I will do this and get these rounded off, and you can do that by filling it. This one needs some work. You can see it. This will show up in your body work. These little areas here, a little bit of filler, all the good. And it's really, I'm going to show you. Because when you go in and you look on here, the best way to do this, I use a piece of plywood and this, or you can get a foam block, but I don't like to use a lot of that. But anyway, I will go like this. Don't go back and forth like that, because you'll just make it worse. Go in. And go up and down with it, with the grain, but go in another way like this. And if you get a real severe flat spot, you can come in here and massage it a little bit on the edge. You can kind of cut it down. Now, as you can see, it took that much work to just fix that one little spot that I missed. But it's very important. And these are another little thing. These last forever. These little 120 grit sponges, they come out and then they will give it enough of a shine where you can see it. And you don't really want a really crazy looking What you don't really want is now you can sit there and with sunlight hitting it, you can actually see it. And it doesn't take a lot of work to get that rounded off. So with this all being said, I'm sitting right now at about, I don't know, probably, I think I can probably start glassing this thing probably tomorrow if I can get some more stuff drying and done. And it's really actually very important that I do get it glassed because I don't want to be moving this airplane a few miles in the back of the old caddy because scratch and dent. But this is another thing I want to bring up to you guys as well. If you get a ding or a scratch in your fuselage, don't sand it out. Don't do it. Don't fill it. Don't do anything. All you want to do with that is get it wet with some Windex and let it pop itself back out. It will do it. And then you can sand off the excess, because if you don't, you're going to see every little scratch that's in there after you get the resin in it, because it's going to swell up. Anything that you see on here is actually done. It's going to swell up. But it's like I said, I got a lot of little body work to do in this thing. And then that thing over there is going to start taking over some transformation. Then we're going to, after we get it glass and get a primer on it and sand that as smooth, we'll sand that really super smooth. Then I'm going to show you how I'm going to make and lay up the lower undercarriage for the gear doors and where the lights go in. Now, I'm using iFly Tilly's headlights because I think they're going to be just about the right size. They're not a great big giant light, but you want to be able to see them. And the strobes and the other lights and things that go in, those need to actually be done now at this point, to where we start running the wires for them and start marking everything and start getting things done and coming to a head. Because there's a lot of work that goes on the inside of that wing. And, you know, the one thing is, I kind of joked about it. Dusty. But anyway, I kind of joke a lot about this airplane and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, this airplane is built like a brick shit house. It really is. It's a very strong airplane. And even with it being a two-piece fuselage, it goes together really super simple. And this is another reason why I did this. And I just used a couple 6-penny nails and put them in here. And these actually will lock this all the way through to where it comes down. And this also is something I'm working on, had to fix it, and it's not a big deal. And then underneath here, it's not any real good way to beef that up in there, except for putting in a piece of, there's just no room to do a lot of it in there. So anyway, you got your screws that go in from this side. I'm just using regular screws. Now they're stainless steel, and the reason I did it is so that if they do get wet and I do let the thing go on, then they don't get locked up and strip and pull anything out. Loctite's not really a big necessity on that particular part, but there are a lot of things, because you are putting a lot of stuff in this airplane. So in order to get it to be ready to fly, and it's kind of one of those deals. So anyway, we're going to drop this off now. I got to start getting things ready to go, start moving into the new place, and got to meet the cable guy and all this other stuff, start getting this done. And so the next show will be from my nice little apartment, because I'm going to make a man cave out of the whole entire place, because I am now single, and with the events that have happened, a lot of people have checked this out. And this and that, I'm just kind of floating and deciding whether or not I want to stay in Washington State. And it's unfortunate what has happened, and we're still friends, but we're just not going to be together. And so I'm going to build jets and go flying and go follow my goals in life, and not trying to sound like I'm self-successful, but I'm not. But the one thing is that I just kind of dealing with somebody that couldn't be honest with me and tell me that, you know, what do you do? But anyway, I've been kind of a emotional roller coaster here lately. And I do apologize for that, guys. But I think one of the biggest things is life happens. And, you know, being 53 and trying to make sense of this and cheating wise and whatever, then you know what? It's all good. And I am fine, and I am going to build airplanes and go fly airplanes and go wreck airplanes and whatever. So, you know, all that being said, thanks for being patient, guys. I know I've been kind of a wreck lately, and one of the reasons why I took such a break on this is because I was trying to save a marriage that actually failed miserably, and it just kind of took a lot out of me. But anyway, I'm fine. I'm going to be fine, and I wish everybody out there the very best. We'll see you in the funny papers.